on the gates of the temple of Delphi. And the truth is, at that point in time, know thyself was actually an admonition to those people entering the temple to know their place. In Greek literature, it's described as, it says here, the proverb is applied to those whose boasts exceed what they are. Know thyself is a warning to pay no attention to the opinion of the multitude. So know thyself was a reminder to say, come on, wake up, get real, pay attention to what's true. Doesn't matter what you think about yourself. It doesn't matter what other people think about you. What really matters is remembering who you truly are. So it was a wake-up call. Don't get too uppity just because you're here. Don't forget your place in the scheme of things. Proverbs says, do you see a man who is wise in his own eyes? There is more hope for a fool than for him. Now, it's said that the best way to know yourself is to observe how you relate to the world around you. Good advice. But the question has to be asked, which self are you actually knowing? See, are you coming to know your personality self, your ego self? Or are you somehow coming to know your spirit self? And there isn't anybody here who would ever show up at a Unity service who doesn't know there's a big difference between those two. You know, if science has taught us anything, is that you can prove or disprove anything. Scientists, as much as they say they're neutral, they set out to prove something. So you can find study after study after study that proves that something is absolutely undeniably true, and then you can turn around and search the literature or the internet. The internet is your friend. Thank you, Ira. And you can find the same number of studies that will tell you that that's absolutely wrong. So the question has to be, can we really rely on our powers of observation to tell us anything that's true? See, the third unity principle says thoughts create. And that means that our thoughts create our reality. And while we would like that to be the reality for everyone, that isn't the case. There really is no independent reality. There really is no absolute truth in this world. So, if you want to get to know your personality, then observe the way you respond and react to the world out there. You know, to the stuff that happens to you. That's how personalities are developed. That's how personalities are defined. Now, there's a guy named Andrew Guide, and he's pretty strong about this. You know, all about, knowing the personality, kind of taken to the extreme. And he says, know thyself, a maxim as pernicious as it is ugly. Whoever studies himself arrests his own development. A caterpillar who seeks to know himself would never become a butterfly. Personality self. Marianne Williamson, kind of moving us back toward knowing our spiritual self, wasn't responding to this, but sort of counters that and says, self-awareness is not self-centeredness, and spirituality is not narcissism. Know thyself is not a narcissistic pursuit. So what I'm going to say is, if you really want to know your spiritual self, the first thing you have to do is take 100% responsibility for the world and how you experience it. Big order. 100% responsibility. When you do that, if you believe or are coming to believe or want to believe anything that the 5 unity principles tell us about, when you do that, you will begin to know yourself as the creator. To know your spirit self, your creator self. So I had to ask myself, there are a lot of artists in this world. Actually, quite a few artists in this congregation. And I'm not talking right now about kids' art, but I mean accomplished artists. And I had to ask myself, does every accomplished artist produce art which I personally enjoy? Guess what? No! There are some really, really good, talented artists that create stuff that I wouldn't hang in my bathroom. See, it's all relative. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. It's not absolute. What you love, I might hate. I don't hate. That's a 4-letter word. My grandchildren taught me that. It's a 4-letter word you want to avoid. But I might not prefer. And the things that I prefer, you might relegate to another status. So, in the same way, I had to look at, if we all are the Christ. I'm pushing some here, okay? If we all are the Christ, I have to understand that not every expression of the Christ is going to create, at least in my opinion, beautiful creations. Is that possible? Is it possible that we can all be the Christ and we can create something that others might not enjoy? See, we got to remember, even in our own traditions, plural traditions, but specifically, an easy example, that not all of the Jews and the Romans in the first century were fond of Jesus. And yet we think he's a pretty special guy. So our job is to refine and develop our own Christ nature to the point where we like all of our own creations. That's how we come to know our true self, our spirit self. See, it's not about what others think. It's about who we are. Now, I don't know about you, but I always thought, know thyself and to thine own self be true, kind of went together. I know, you're much smarter than I am. They don't! They didn't! To thine own self be true. Thank you, Shakespeare. In the play Hamlet. This above all, to thine own self be true, and it must follow as night the day, thou canst not be then false to any man. What he was saying in that play was be yourself, be true to yourself, and also do not engage in self-deception. By the way, the biggest self-deception that we each engage in is pretending that we are anything less than the Christ we are created to be. That's a lie. It's an act. Now, being true to yourself is not necessarily a consistent experience or expression. Being true to yourself doesn't always look exactly the same in every circumstance. Being true to yourself requires flexibility. It requires adaptability. It requires versatility. See, the world is constantly shifting and changing. Stuff out there is always in flux. That's why a lot of people call it an illusion, by the way. Because there's nothing about the world out there that is absolutely consistently true. And that means that you're going to have a very hard time defining yourself in relationship to the world. Things change. You know, I wrote my own little Tao of Robert. I wrote a Tao in there about change. And I realized, you know, it's not only us old folks who engage in this, you know, well, back when I was a kid, things were really different. I told you we had our granddaughter and her two friends. We're sitting around the dinner table and we're talking. And they're going, I can't believe it. When we were in junior high, we didn't have any of this stuff. And now my little sister comes home and tells me about all of this. I mean, kids in junior high. And they blame it on media. They blame it on what we pay attention to, what we look at, what we see. So change. Let me read this little writing of mine. And I'll see if I can read it in a way that you can hear it and get what I'm trying to say. In times of transformation, little plans must be laid aside. You must know change without loss. Movement without space. Growth without reaching. Duration without time. Expansion without extension. Creation without effort. Individuation without exclusion. Thus, the superior one moves in the world without being moved. The wise one, when walking into darkness, carries his own light. He neither bumps his head nor stumbles, shining his light directly on the path. He is unconcerned with where he has been or with what is around the corner. The key for me here is being true to yourself, not being defined by circumstances or expectations or by anything that goes on in the world. There's a little story called The Money Man. The Money Man. Thank you, Zelda. We have this little prayer wheel. Any of you ever seen these before? Okay? And there's nice inscriptions of the prayer written around here. The idea about the prayer wheel is, if you're good at it, there you go, good, you get it going. Every revolution says the prayer. Inside the prayer wheel, we actually have a load of prayers in here. Wow. Traditionally, the prayer, and it probably actually says it around the outside, but I can't read it. Traditionally, the prayer inside the prayer wheel is Om Mani Padme Hum. Om being the universal principle, Mani being the jewel, Padme being the lotus, and being wisdom. Every revolution, Om Mani Padme Hum, go around, there we go. Thank you, Zelda, for bringing this to us and sharing it with us. So the Mani Man was a holy man. Regular guy, but a holy man. And he went around with his Mani wheel. That's what they call it. It's called a prayer wheel in the West, but they call it a Mani wheel. That's why they called him the Mani Man. And I want to read you this story of the mining man. Have any of you ever heard it? Good. We're lucky. The mining man lived with his son and their one fine horse. The son was the joy of the man's life. The boy's pride and joy was the horse. Father and son lived free from excessive wants and needs in one of several rough stone houses near a river on the edge of the flat plains. One day their horse disappeared. The neighbors bewailed the loss of the old man's sole material asset. But the old man just said, "Give thanks for everything. Who can say what is good or bad? We'll see." After several days, the splendid creature returned, followed by a pair of wild mustangs. These the old man and his son swiftly trained. Then everyone sang songs of celebration and congratulated the old man on his unexpected good fortune. The man simply smiled and said, "I am grateful, but who knows? We'll see." Then, while racing one of the mustangs, the boy fell and shattered his leg. Some neighbors carried him home, cursing the wild horse and bemoaning the boy's fate. But the old man, sitting at his beloved son's bedside, neither complained nor answered their complaints, but simply nodded his head, saying again, "The Buddha is beneficent. I am grateful for my son's life. We shall see." The next week, military officers appeared, seeking young conscripts for an ongoing border war. All the local boys were immediately taken away, except for the bedridden son. Then the neighbors congratulated the old man on his great good fortune, attributing such luck to good karma. He smiled and said nothing. One day, when the boy and his father were watching their fine horses graze on prairie grass, the old man said to his son, "Life just goes around and around, up and down like a water wheel. Our lives are like its buckets, being emptied and then refilled again and again. Like the potter's clay, our physical existences are fashioned into one form after another. Their shapes are broken and then reformed again and again. So be kind to one and all, and don't be biased based on illusions regarding gain and loss. Have neither hope nor fear, neither expectation nor anxiety. Give thanks for everything, whatever your lot may be. Accept everything and accept everyone. Be simple and carefree, remaining naturally at ease and at peace." Now, there actually is a corollary to that story, because sometimes when we hear stories like this, we say, "Wow, that's really sweet, that feels really good." But we don't relate to the mining man sitting out on the plains, spinning his wheel. It's a great story. The corollary goes like this. In a small town called Brentwood, there was a Unity Church. That church had 2 ministers who loved them and served them. One day, one of the ministers said, "Our service appears to have decreasing value. Perhaps it is time for us to move on." Some of the congregation were happy, and some were sad. None knew for sure what this meant. The minister said, "Who can say what is good or bad? Wait and see." Some in the congregation stepped up to serve in more obvious ways. There grew in the congregation a greater sense of ownership and responsibility. Some thought the new ways were good. Some were unsure. Wisdom counseled to wait and see. One day, the minister was guided to remain in service and communicated this to the growing leadership. Some were angry, some were happy. Many were confused. The peace that had been the hallmark of this congregation was disturbed. Would this lead to disintegration or to a higher level of integration? Again, wisdom counsel. Wait and see. It became clear that no one, neither the minister nor the congregation, knew for certain the outcome of this adventure. Those who thought they knew, and those who knew they didn't, began to recognize that their lives and the life of the church were part of the constant evolution expressing love in the world. They recognized, like the Mani man told his son, that it is essential to be kind to one and all, and not be biased based upon illusions regarding gain and loss. To have neither hope nor fear, expectation nor anxiety. To give thanks for everything, whatever your lot may be. To accept everything and accept everyone. To be simple and carefree, remaining naturally at ease and in peace. So know thyself and be true to thyself. That's loving the world.